Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. As you'll note by the little sign down there, I always forget where to point it. We are pre-recorded today, and that is because we have a guest who's going to be joining us. And like a lot of people, being able to come on the air at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the West Coast isn't exactly convenient. It's barely convenient for me, and I do the show. So we're pre-recording this. It's actually Saturday here, just after Thanksgiving, so I'm still half in a food coma from the weekend or from the holiday. But we are going to have a lovely conversation with Scott Wilke, writer of the upcoming book Periwinkle, which is currently a Kickstarter going on right now. So let's bring in Scott and talk about his project. Here we go. Hello, Scott.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, happy to have you. Now, this is a holiday-themed book,
Yep.
as we can see by your hat.
Yeah, I'm channeling my inner Periwinkle.
There you go. So, well, let's start off with, tell us about Periwinkle. Periwinkle is a person, I take it, from the trailer on the Kickstarter page. It sounds like there was a slaughter, but they left one alive. And so tell us about Periwinkle and how this all comes about.
Yeah, for sure. The good tagline that somebody came up with, and I'm going to steal, they called it Kill Bill meets Elf. So we're going to run with that. But long story short, Krampus and Belsnickel ended up organizing a coup and revolted against Santa. And they ended up killing Santa and taking half the elves with them. And now the other half that survived ended up just going about, making Keebler elf cookies or whatever. But one elf remained behind in the North Pole, which is in ruins now. And his name is Periwinkle. And he is looking for revenge against everyone who was part of the coup, and then especially Belsnickel and Krampus.
Okay. So why did they coup against Santa?
See, that's the fascinating part, and that's the part I've enjoyed, is that you're going to get stories, you're going to get people's versions of history, and it's going to be kind of up to you to determine who's telling most of the truth. Krampus has his own version of why he rebelled. Belsnickel has his own version. Pumpernickel, which is actually Periwinkle's brother, who helped organize the coup, he's got his version of events. So there's just a lot. You'll see flashbacks. It's really going to be up to you to kind of piece together who you really truly believe, because even Periwinkle's got a little bit of a distorted view of things. But yeah, long story short, some of the history remembers it as the elves felt like slaves. They were locked up in the workshop. That's Pumpernickel's version. Krampus felt betrayed. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating journey through, the history of that. So
Now, Krampus I'm familiar with, and of course the legends of Saint Nick and all that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other character?
Belsnickel. Yep.
Belsnickel.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Yeah, he was made popular by, if you watch The Office, Dwight Schrute. He brought the Belsnickel into the, the collective pop culture.
Okay.
But he is, depending on where you're from in Europe, Belsnickel and Krampus are interchangeable characters. So, the Palatine area has one version, etc. And the Pennsylvania Dutch have adopted and continue to honor and have that as part of their tradition as the Belsnickel. But essentially, they are the same character. They do the same job. They're kind of the companion to Santa. They judge your worth. They're usually the one that offers the discipline side of things. So yeah, and I took some liberties with history and lore, and just ended up incorporating the two together. So they work side by side. But yeah, just two of the same kind of characters and lore, just different versions of each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Periwinkle is an elf.
Yep.
Where did his name come from?
It's interesting because I just wanted a name that was very unassuming, because the whole because I wanted to write a Christmas story. I'm a big Christmas buff, so I wanted to write a Christmas story, and I love revenge stories. So I didn't want to include Santa. I feel like that's been done a lot, with Claus and Klaus and all those. So elf was a logical next step. So I'm like, okay, I got an elf as a protagonist. What's kind of an elfish name, like the most unassuming kind of name you wouldn't be that wouldn't trigger fear in the enemy? And not sure exactly where Periwinkle came. Maybe I was coloring with my daughter and I was looking at a crayon. But yeah, Periwinkle was just like, that's like an adorable and kind of cool name. So it kind of went from there.
Okay. And his brother is Pumpernickel.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So
And then, yep.
how you said that they threw a coup. What happened to Santa?
I don't want to spoil too much, but he got offed by Krampus. The what set that all up will be more delved into in the book, but Krampus was the one who dealt the final blow. And then the half of the elves that were in on it, they abandoned the North Pole and followed Krampus to Krampus Castle. So yeah, now they're doing his bidding. So they essentially almost kind of just went from one tyrant to another, so to speak. But yeah, all of it kind of, you get pieces of it throughout the book, and then the big picture's painted at the end as to what all happened. But yeah.
All right. Now, how the book itself, is this a one shot? Is this the start of something? What are we looking at here with the Kickstarter?
For sure, yeah. It's a one shot. It's an 80+ pager. So you're gonna get the full story of this piece of the story. I do have a lot more I want to explore, because as I was delving into Periwinkle and reading up on history, it's just a very deep well in European lore with Christmas and all the characters involved. So just as I started to read that, a ton of story ideas were blossoming as I'm writing Periwinkle. So I have a lot of I want to explore in a prequel, and then I have a lot of sequel ideas that I'll be working on. But this will be one full contained story, so you won't be waiting for future issues or anything like that. You're gonna get one big book, one behemoth of a book.
Now, you're the writer. Who's the rest of the creative team?
Yep. Arturo Mesa, he is our artist. He is a genius. I'm getting rave reviews for the art, and rightfully so, because his style, his attention to detail is unparalleled in my opinion. And then Dave Lentz, he's our letterer, true magician with design. So yeah, together it's the three of us making that book, and then we are publishing under Mike Teener's banner, Bad Bug, and Mike's been hugely influential in the whole thing. So, because I told him we were working on Undercity Tales back in 2019, and Bad Bug yet wasn't a banner yet. It wasn't a publisher. It was just kind of a little spark in his mind, and he had asked if I had any other additional story ideas, and I told him the premise of Periwinkle, and he's like, let's talk. So he's been hounding me since 2019 to finish the script, and finally did. He's the one that found Arturo for me. He found him on Instagram. And I compare finding Arturo to kind of what it must have felt like to maybe find like Steven Spielberg in like film school, because like this guy's gonna be huge, under the big publishers one day. So the fact I got him like on the right when he started out, I'm so fortunate. But yeah, the whole thing has been very serendipitous how it all came together. But yeah, that long story short, that's the team behind it.
Kind of a Christmas miracle, huh?
Totally, totally, yeah.
Now, you said Arturo's doing all of the artwork, so pencils, inks, colors.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What about covers?
Covers, we just have the one. We threw around doing variants. We'd love to explore variants as a stretch goal. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. But Arturo nailed that initial cover so much. He did this really cool design where, if you stand from a distance, it looks like a Christmas tree. So just such a beautiful thing. And then we're offering a hardcover edition, a limited stock of those. And so that's just going to be the logo that Dave Lentz made, which in and of itself is a piece of art on a hardcover with like a brown backing. It looks really sharp with that gold foiling. So yeah, we didn't really explore too much into the variants. We'd love to in further editions of it, maybe. But yeah, that's all we got currently.
Now, what are your stretch goals on this? Because you've already broke the $8,000 mark that you originally set. So this is happening. There's
For sure.
no, it's not. Yeah, I mean, you're well over. You're probably what 25% above at
Yep.
this point. You're like 10 grand.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the stretch goals that people can look forward to? That good reason to jump in now, even though it's already funded.
For sure. We got a really cool one. It was the initial one that we kind of announced right off the bat, and it's Periwinkle Bingo. So if you've looked at any of the pages from Arturo, you'll see that there's just a ton of hidden details, a ton of little hidden characters or Easter eggs to other franchises, to other things. So as those pages were coming out, Mike and Alice, they're the couple behind Bad Bug, they came up with the idea of doing like a bingo card. Kind of add in that desire for rereadability as well, because as you'll go through, it's like a Batman toy, so then you can go through the pages and find where you saw a Batman toy, and you'll mark that on your bingo card. So that's going to be the $12,000 stretch goal, because we want that to be a very interactive game, and with a lot of possibilities behind that. The additional stretch goals we want to just kind of keep close to the chest, because they're pretty interesting and significant, and a lot of it too we want to explore adding on to the book, because we're already giving you guys like an 80 pager, but there's definitely some potential to expand on that story. So that's going to be part of it as well. So we'd love to, if we could keep going, give you like 100-page book at the end of the day. But yeah.
Let me see if I can do this real quick. Let's see. You were mentioning Arturo's artwork, and I want to actually see if I can show it by sharing my screen here. Let's see. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So we've got the setup page. I mean, this is some really nice looking artwork.
Yeah, isn't it gorgeous? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and very professional. I mean,
totally.
The coloring, the lettering, just down the line. This could be from any of the big companies. So.
For sure, yeah. Because Dave does he works extensively with like Source Point and all them. So I mean, he's top tier as far as letterers go. And then Arturo, I think he's only got one other work before this. It's called 13th Labor. It's on Kickstarter as well. That Kickstarter might be over by the time this is published though. But so that's the main. He doesn't have a ton of, but like he's the way his work level. I mean, it looks like he's been working for DC or Marvel.
Oh yeah. I mean, his style is probably a little more cartoony than mainstream, but it works great for what you're doing here.
Totally.
Periwinkle seems like a kind of a tall elf.
He's on the larger side, because if you look at those earlier pages, standing next to his brother Pumpernickel,
that's the one.
He's got some height to him, yeah. So he's a little bit more on the intimidating side. But you'll find too that another cool piece we want to add on to the back matter of the book is something that Arturo designed. Is kind of a de-evolution process for the elves. As they leave Santa, their magic starts to deplete. So that's shown internally and externally. So you'll see that they kind of start to shrivel up and get kind of, nasty and gangly looking. So earlier panel, because we'll do some flashbacks, you'll see Pumpernickel in kind of his quote unquote heyday. So there's going to be some minor differences there, but yeah, that it kind of afflicts them in multitude of ways. But yeah.
Does he turn the North Pole into an axe?
I love it. Thank you. Like I get giddy talking about that axe, because that axe was a big inspiration for this current iteration of Periwinkle, because I've written like 3 or 4 or 5. But yeah, the handle is made from the actual North Pole, and the blade is made from the broken runner of Santa's sleigh.
I was about to guess that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
I struggled to find the right tone and the right world for Periwinkle. And early iterations, I had this very like extensive, kind of convoluted past where they were battle elves, and he had like these specialized battle elven blades, and it was just too much. And like I had like a Emmett Brown flux capacitor moment, and I'm like, you know what? It'd be cool if he just homemade this weapon. And then that's where we got now, because Periwinkle, he's not trained fighter, he's just kind of a barroom brawler. He's not good at it, he's just a brute, and he'll take his lickings, but he'll deal them out too. So that whole blade kind of sparked what you're seeing in front of you, so that's the origin point, I guess.
And I see on here his naughty side. He's marked off a lot of names, but Belsnickel and Krampus.
Yep. Yeah, it's his naughty hit list. Yeah. So by the time we catch up, there are four elves that were part of the coup, especially that organized it. That was Hazel, Mazarin, Clementine, and Pumpernickel. So by the time we pick up the story, he's already knocked out three, about to knock out four. So yeah, all he's got left are the big players now.
Right. Let's show the cover while we're at it, because you're right. It's a very nice cover. Yeah, you can see that how it makes the outline of a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I love that idea. Arturo just takes everything I suggest and he amplifies it by 1,000. Because I left the cover primarily up to him. I'm like, I don't know. Here's some ideas I have, and he came up with that. And like, if you look at the North Pole, which is in that like little lower shot of the Christmas tree, I had told him I want the North Pole on a hill. Like I gave very simple instructions, and the workshop is on the top. So again, Arturo, in his genius, elevates that. He designs the hill to look similar to a Christmas tree, and then he finds German-inspired building designs that mimic a star shape, and that's what he makes the North Pole. So it looks like the star on top of a Christmas tree. Just minor little lovely details like that just elevate this book to a next level. So
Yeah, I like the tombstones as part of the gifts.
yeah. Yeah, because we got of course Saint Nicholas's tombstone, and then also 7 of the 8 reindeer have been slaughtered by Belsnickel. There's one remaining, and we'll meet her later. Her name's Prancer. But yeah, so there's actually a dual revenge story going on because Prancer wants to avenge her friends and her sister Dancer. So it's kind of cool to see Prancer and Periwinkle's stories kind of mirror each other. One in animal form, one in elf form.
Yeah. All right, let's come back to here now, and we'll stop the sharing. All right. That is some really cool looking stuff. I gotta admit, I think Arturo's work is top notch there.
Sure.
I'm half thinking I should steal him myself at this point for a project.
Right.
But that is very cool. Now let's talk a little bit about you and how you got into this. Where does your desire to do comics come from?
Yeah. Man, I got my first comic book. I don't remember my exact age, but my mom bought me a Superman comic from a grocery store. That sparked my love of that medium. And then I always just loved telling stories. A joke I always make is that I was the one telling my mom bedtime stories when she tucked me in. So the minute I could write stories, I remember I had that Brother published the little word processor where you only see like 2 lines of your document. And
I had that myself.
yep. Right. And then it took like 3 hours to print a page, but like it was one of my favorite possessions. So I just loved writing from the minute I could write. Ended up going to college. I went, I majored in English and writing, and then I minored in film production, went to film school. Very useless degrees if you don't end up doing that. So just tried to find my route to tell stories. So I've written pretty much every type of medium imaginable. I've written short stories, I've written radio plays, I've written commercials, I've written if you can think of it, I probably wrote something in that at one point. And interestingly enough, it never dawned on me to write comic books until I was at like my 3rd or 4th Comic-Con, walking down Artist Alley, and I was starting to run into all these writers, not just artists, but writers. and kind of picking their brain. And they're like, yeah, I found my artist on DeviantArt, and we self-published this book. I was like, wow. I'm like, I didn't even think about this, because I'm like, I don't know how to draw. I can draw stick figures, but that's about it. So but after talking to like third or fourth writer there, I was like, I went home and talked to my wife. I'm like, I think I want to try writing comics. I love comics. I got a huge collection. um, so I just started writing, and then behind me you see Legend of Everett Forge. That was my first book. So I wrote the script out for that. I sent it to Kickstarter. After a failed attempt, I got the second time it funded. So I'm on issue 3 currently, and then I've been writing ever since. I've written a couple titles for Bad Bug, Undercity Tales, and Dead End Moon. I've written a title for About Time Comics called Red Scare. So it's just been a whirlwind since that Comic-Con.
So how long ago was that Comic-Con?
That was like 2013. So I got into the game. Everett Forge funded in 2014. So I've been working diligently since 2014 on comics.
So what's your end game? Where do you want to go? Is this you like doing the self-publishing? Do you have any desire to work for any of the other companies, like play with the Marvel Universe or DC, or where do you want to go?
And I would love, like, I always said I would love to write, even before I was writing comics, I always said I'd love to write a Superman story. I mean, he's my go-to. I'm a big Superman fan. Can actually, if I show you, I got him over there.
Okay.
So yeah, love Superman. But yeah, I just love the indie game, because there's really no limit to what you can do here. You're not. And Mike at Bad Bug, he just wants wild and fun stories, so he's not super strict. And same for Lee. I write for Legend of Everforge is published under About Time Comics, which is owned by Lee Giles. So he's super open to like whatever you want to explore, whatever topics, etc. So I kind of like the freedom that comes with indie. It's just the burden of the money aspect of it. I wish that was a little easier to come by, because I'm not looking for fame or glory or anything. I'm just looking to tell stories, but it's just an expensive endeavor. So if I could just kind of bridge that gap and figure out that hurdle, I'd be fine with writing indies for the rest of the time. Because honestly, I love doing our own stuff without the micromanagement of like a big publisher.
It's funny you said you had an English degree with a film minor, and that it's useless unless you do that. I have a degree in computer programming, and I don't do it, so it's just as useless. So it doesn't matter what the degree is if you're not using it.
Yeah.
You know?
Very true. Yeah, but it works in a certain way. I mean, I think it helps us think outside the box. So I work as a risk manager at a hospital. So I think I look at things differently with that creative, right brain, left brain ability to switch back and forth. So I think it's a benefit. People should hire more creative people.
Absolutely, and experience is the best thing to fuel creativity. So the more you get out there, the more difference you do. I don't think there's a factory for creating a writer. I think writers come about it. They go on their path. They find out, what, I've got these stories I have to tell, and that's when they become a writer. But that path that gets them there, that's unique, and that's what makes writing so different.
Totally agree.
So, now tell me about your other project. You said you had it's on number 3.
Yeah, Legend of Everett Forge. That's my own. So that's a steampunk western. It's set in an alternate 1889 where robots control the American West. So it's called the Machine Territory. And Everett Forge is the main character, obviously, and he's got a vendetta against the leader of the machines, Omega. So it's a very cool, if you like Westworld or just westerns in general, and you always wanted more robots in there. It's definitely a good place to go to. I stopped at 3 just for a hot minute, because 3 was a real cluster F of an issue to finish, where we had a lot of delays with the art and everything. So it took us about a year to fulfill. And I felt really bad for all my backers, and I just kind of needed a break from him. And luckily Periwinkle, I wanted to get that cooking. But yeah, I'm ready to jump into number 4. Script's about halfway done. But yeah.
Now, who's your artist on that series?
It's a really talented group called Click Art Studios. So they do the whole kit and caboodle. They do the line art, the coloring, the lettering as well. So they're a one-stop shop. They're just so busy because they got so many projects, so many things cooking right now. But
Yeah.
they're great.
Cool. And that you said the first one came out in 2014.
Yeah, 2014 we funded. Can't remember if it fulfilled. Yeah, I think it fulfilled in 2014. But yeah, since so we got that one, and then issue 3 we fulfilled in 2020. We funded in 2019 and fulfilled in 2020. And 2020 was already such a cluster F of a year to begin with. But yeah, so luckily, like Mike came up with, he was working on Bad Bug, and he had his other titles, which kind of helped me. I was working on Undercity Tales at the same time as we were fulfilling Everett Forge, and then he started on Dead End Moon, which I wrote, and then Lee Giles came up with Red Scare for About Time Comics, and he asked me to write that one for him as well. So in between Periwinkle and Everett Forge, I've been nonstop writing.
So, what is your writing process? Every writer seems to have their own thing. Mine is to, I break the story down into scenes, and then I break it down into an outline of 22 pages, and I write from there. What's your process? How do you approach a story and in your formatting?
It's interesting because like I don't really, I wish I see like other people storyboarding, and I see other people with like really detailed outlines, and I'm like, man, maybe I'm just not that organized. I mean, I just kind of go. I have a beginning and an end. I'm like, I know I need to bridge that gap. So yeah, I don't have a real. I know my beats. I know what I want to hit. I know what I want to hit by like page 15. I know what I want to hit by page 20. By the end, by 24. And I found too, a lot of times that the story's more organic when I don't, keep it within, I'm more like a shepherd to the story. I'm just like, okay, keep over here, go back over here. I don't have that strict, I'm not pulling it with a leash. Like, we got to go this way. Because sometimes the story almost wants to tell itself a certain way. There's been a lot of times, like I've noticed, like with Dead End Moon, there was a character. I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this character by page 5. We don't need him. We need some exposition, etc. And then I got to page 5, and then I'm like, well, now it's feeling too much like I need to keep him around. And then it's a character we've ended up keeping, and we'll probably keep for the foreseeable future. So of course, yeah, I have my beats laid out, but other than that, I'm very much, I'm here to help the story and shepherd the story forward. If the story wants to take me somewhere, I'm gonna see where it wants to take me.
Now, coming out of with a English lit or English degree, film degree, outside of comics, you get kind of typecast as a writer. You become, you get into a genre. You're the horror guy, you're the comedy guy, and very few writers can really break out of that. You think of Stephen King, and he's done some other stuff, but he's the horror guy.
Yeah.
In comics, it's a little more freedom in that sense, is that you can be the guy that writes horror and writes comedy and writes action adventure and then melodrama. You can be all over the board. What is your thing? You've got a steampunk western, and now you've got a Christmas revenge tale. What is your thing? What gets you going? What's your story that you love?
No, I know. Yeah, I know what you mean, and I think I've been very fortunate to be friends with people and have been employed to write certain stories that kind of take me out of my comfort zone. Undercity Tales, for instance, it's a neo-noir, sci-fi. I love those genres, but I've written sci-fi, but never neo-noir, never a detective story. The fact that Mike trusted me enough to do that, I was beyond thankful because it took me out of this comfort zone. But I like the conversational side of stories. I like the dialogue portion. I'm a big Tarantino fan because I love how he can draw out a scene, just pure conversation. Because they tell you in film school, it's like, don't let dialogue scenes run past, a certain amount of minutes. And Tarantino's writing like 30-minute dialogue scenes, and they're as palpable and, nerve-wracking as an action scene. So I love that. I love that banter. I love that dialogue. So if anything, I could say that I like to write dialogue. I like to write the banter, and I'm big into revenge stories. It's because Everett Forge is a revenge story, Periwinkle's a revenge story, and Dead and Moon is another one that's basically a revenge story as well. So those two things are definitely my sweet spots. They're what I enjoy writing. They're what I get the most enjoyment out of.
I always approach stories from characters first, characters and events, and to me, characters are what drive the story. Events are kind of what makes it go into a genre.
Yeah, totally.
You say revenge stories are your thing.
Yeah.
What are the elements that every good revenge story needs to have?
Oh, that's a good question. The reason for the revenge has to be intriguing enough, not necessarily high stakes enough, because if we look at like something like John Wick, his dog died, like they killed his dog. Not necessarily high stakes, but it's really what that dog meant to him. And
Everybody
those,
from a visceral point of view that
yeah,
you killed my dog, yeah. So
yeah, but like to have like an hour 40 plus of him just like rampaging, it's like for a dog, but it's like it's beyond the dog, and that's the thing. It's like for Forge, I tried to find again what that sweet spot is. It's like it's a big enough thing, a motive of revenge, but it's what that revenge and what Omega took for Forge beyond just that. I mean, it's hard to kind of communicate that, but a similar thing to Periwinkle as well. Because for Periwinkle, he's got a very complicated past in that he had a very rough upbringing. And I think he thought he found his purpose in life, which kind of made all that tragedy and trauma in his life have meaning. And so for that to be removed, it almost removed the purpose of that tragedy. So it's just like that tragedy was just like fate's, shits and giggles type of thing. So that was kind of what I'm exploring with Periwinkle. Dead and Moon, it's kind of more straightforward, but again, a little bit more complex than face value. So it's hard. I think that's the biggest thing is just what the motivating factor is. And if you can find something that just somebody who, Dead and Moon, for instance, like she lost her dad. For those of us who haven't lost a parent or something like that, it's hard to relate to that, but we know what that feeling is to lose something like a piece of your soul, you know what I mean? So it's just finding that whatever that conduit of connection to your reader base with something relatable, because again, some of us don't know what it's like to have a hitman kill our dog, but we know what that's like to have a piece of hope that we were clinging on to be taken from us. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like everything in John Wick is based off of his love for his wife. The dog was the last gift. Getting the car back was because there was a photo in the glove compartment of them.
Yeah.
So they have personalized it to that level. Do you think that's important to personalize the revenge story as much as possible?
I think so. I think for both the character and the reader, because again, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of us that would be willing to go on a killing spree for something. It would have to be pretty high stakes for me to want to, go on a rampage like Periwinkle, for instance, killing, a crap ton of elves. But if you connect it to a base level, because like for Periwinkle, we all know what that's like to want to find meaning in our lives or serve a purpose. And especially for those of us who have gone through trauma and tragedy, we don't want to think that that was just bad luck. Like we were like, okay, well, maybe that it was leading me down this path that I needed to go down. And for that to be robbed from you, we can assume, and, especially I think my generation, the millennials, can especially feel that kind of desire because, the things that we've seen in our short time on this planet. We want to believe that it means something bigger, and even generations older than us, they've experienced much worse tragedies, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think for the reader, you need to understand and personalize it, and a good writer will contour it so you can personalize it.
So you're saying that, going on a killing spree just because they took the McRib away again isn't really going to be enough for a full story.
It's if you can convey what that McRib meant to the protagonist, I think you should be fine. Yeah, if that was something his mom gave him when he was a kid, and it made him feel warm and special. You could probably spin a story around that, I think.
Now, do you personalize it to yourself when you're writing these characters? Do you come up with the reasons for the revenge story based on something that would trigger you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So for Everett Forge, part of it is a woman. So yeah, I think about if something happened to my wife, like how that would spur me to go to any depths of hell to avenge that. For Periwinkle, it's again focusing a lot on his purpose and meaning, and giving him not knowing where his place is anymore in this. And I can definitely feel that. Just try to, I've never known exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I know I always wanted to write, but that doesn't pay the mortgage all the time. So I've always just struggled with that. So that was an easy kind of find for me with figuring out where Periwinkle's motive was, because again, he finally found what he thought was his place in life, and it was robbed from him, and now he's just kind of floating aimlessly and angry. So yeah, I definitely can feel that vibe, because as a writing major, trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, yeah, I could definitely feel that.
So an angry, aimless elf.
Yeah. It's a dangerous opponent.
Yeah. Now, you talked about that there's some prequel stuff you want to do, and I have a feeling from what you just said is that it's his life prior to becoming one of Santa's elves in the prequel, because, you kind of setting that up in your conversation.
It's going to actually be more, the prequel that I'm thinking of is going to actually explore more of the relationship between Claus, Nicholas, Krampus, and the Belsnickel.
Okay.
And so leading you up to the coup, basically, but give you more, because there's a lot of nods to what happened in Belsnickel and Krampus's past, how they're connected, their relationship to one another. I'd love to explore that more within this story, but I don't think it really needs to be or fits within this story. But I definitely want to explore that in a prequel and kind of give more of the origin story behind the three of them.
It's okay, but so if it's a revenge story and saying he gets the guys he's after, what are the sequels? Where do those go?
Sequels is a lot of fun because there's, beyond just the Christmas, there's a lot of other holiday lore, and I love exploring European origins of certain things that I want to explore with those. So in this world that I've created, all the holidays obviously do exist, and then the gods, deities, etc., that kind of form those holidays also exist. So essentially, after Santa died, there was a big void in their whole universe. And so now the question is, with Periwinkle, whatever happens at the end of his story, what's going to now try to fill that void? So yeah, we definitely want to explore the different holidays and how Periwinkle fits into all those equations.
Okay. That's kind of fascinating. Now you got my mind going.
Right.
So I was about to say why the European origins, but I think, it's not like there's a lot of American origins. We pretty much borrow most of ours from the European origins or some of the other. But
yeah.
Why the European over maybe, say, some of the Slavic ones or some of the Russians or Asian, or is there a possibility of playing in some of those other?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg going into the lore that I've explored. I think I started at this point because it's near and dear to my heart. Because my mom, she was born and raised in Austria. So from a young child, she would tell me the stories of Krampus and how he would come door to door. He had chains that he'd drag on the floor. If you were naughty, he'd put you in a satchel, like just nightmare inducing stuff that just really stuck with me. So yeah, that's a big inspiration as to why I started where I started. But yeah, there's so many other countries where and their lore is just as rich, and I definitely want to explore all of that, and I want to do it with respect, of course, as well. But yeah, there's, like I said, it's a deep, deep, deep well that I look forward to diving into.
Why do you think, and I have my own opinions on this, but why do you think that most of the stories that come out of Europe that are considered children's stories are frightening as hell?
Right? And our kids are so soft. Like my daughter, she won't watch like anything remotely, with any type of drama or anything like it. So I don't know. I don't know what it is about that. I think it was a way to, uh, I don't know, to command respect. To keep. I mean, what better way to scare your kids straight than to think that a horned demon's gonna come into your house on Christmas and
Yeah.
snatch you up? I mean, they were so busy farming and just trying to keep everyone alive. Like, let the lore and kind of teach our kids to be good.
Like, don't go into the forest. Why? There's a monster, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just easier than trying to explain to you that you could get in trouble. Yeah. But,
Totally, totally.
yeah. And I've noticed that we've kind of homogenized it here in the States. We have Disneyified just about every fairy tale. But you look at something like in England, you got to remember that Doctor Who is a children's show.
Yeah.
And that's got some of the scariest things in it.
For sure. Yeah.
And so, I talk to British people who always talk about how they used to watch Doctor Who from behind the couch because it's like,
That's right.
peeking around the corner. But yeah, here we tone everything down so much.
So much. Yeah. To the point, I mean, we even watched, I don't know if you watched the new Home Alone reboot, sequel, whatever you would call that. That was again I mean, even the villains, quote unquote, were like these super nice people, and it's just stuff like that. I'm like, you take the soul, the heart out of a story at that point, the fun out of a story. Because I mean, what's the fun of watching like good people, get pelted with like pool balls? I mean, I'd rather see the wet bandits get hit by like a can of paint because they're bad guys. You want to root for them to get hurt.
Yeah, that's true. Though the Kevin McAllister was kind of brutal.
Oh yeah. Those guys would have been dead within like the first 5 minutes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, he was definitely seeing dead people.
Totally, yeah. But that, I mean, as a kid, like you didn't even think, like it's not until we got older I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that's brutal. That's a coma. That guy should be in a coma right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no wonder Joe Pesci is so grumpy all the time. All that head trauma.
No kidding.
Now, how far? I mean, is the Periwinkle? It's basically at 80 pages. You got a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Is the graphic novel done completely, or is it in progress?
It's in progress, yeah. But Arturo is he's knocking out the pages left and right. Just got some more today. So, I mean, we should be ahead of schedule. I think we put the tentative date as like September, but, we always want to give like those 3 months buffer. So we'll probably have it done far in advance of that. We also want to make sure that we give out the digital, because there's 3 chapters essentially in the story. So we really want to deliver those 3 chapters as they're completed electronically. So you'll have stories, you'll have something to read long before, you get the physical copy in your hands. But yeah, Arturo, super efficient, super speedy. And the level of detail he's putting into each page, I don't know. I don't think he sleeps, honestly, that he's able to pull this off. But yeah.
Now, do you find it different to approach writing, say, an individual comic to an 80-page graphic novel?
I found it far more liberating to write this 80 pager because I wasn't confined to, the 21, 24 pages for each issue. It kind of, and like each chapter is not necessarily the same length. So I just felt almost like a Netflix special, what that must feel like to write for Netflix, because I just felt very free. And I feel like the story is a lot better because Mike and I talked about potentially releasing this, in 3 separate issues, doing Kickstarters for each 3 issues. And I argued against that because I'm like, this story I think needs to be told in the 80 plus pages that I've written. You should be able to just consume this in one reading. So yeah, but yeah, it felt more liberating. I think moving forward, I'll probably steer towards this kind of, set up, this design, because I think the story I told is really great with this 80 page kind of structure. So yeah, I liked it better.
Did you go in planning it to be 80 pages, or did you just start writing it, and when you got around there, like, okay, 80 is a good cutoff point?
Yeah, back when I originally told Mike about the idea, I told him, I'm like, yeah, maybe we could do like a 40-page like extended comic book on this thing. And Mike had said to me, he's like, let this thing breathe. He's like, I think you got enough here to let it breathe. So him saying that kind of like opened up my mind and started including more lore, history, and like as I did that, it started expanding. Then I'm like, okay, well, these are kind of breaking into chapters at this point, so let me break them down to specified chapters. So yeah, it started off with kind of humble beginnings, so to speak, with just like maybe like a 40-page book, and it really did expand as I let it breathe, as Mike said. So yeah.
All right. Now, since you said that you don't really outline, you just kind of, you're beginning, you're at a couple points. Does that work as well when you're doing something this large compared to just, I mean, if you're, the beginning and end of an individual issue that's only like 20 some odd pages, that's a little easier. There's not a lot of territory to go off on. But when you get to 80 pages, you could get deep into the woods pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. And I had to find myself, I had to wrangle myself in at times. But like, again, having that, once I saw that it was developing into chapters, that gave me more of a strict kind of, again, like the shepherd leading the sheep. I was like, okay, here's the path I need to go down. So yeah, then I had the set endings for each chapter. So like chapter 1 is Pumpernickel, chapter 2 Belsnickel, chapter 3 Krampus. There's kind of just like built-in tent poles within those chapters I knew I wanted to hit at what times. And again, not being set to like I have to complete this chapter in 24 pages was really nice, because I'm like, well, I want to let this scene breathe a little bit more. I don't want to condense it to 6 panels. I'm like, let me just open this up a little. Let's have 3 on this page, 3, etc. I wanted the art to speak for itself. I'm big into that. I'm not big into narration. So a lot of times there's a lot, if you look back, if people look at the Kickstarter at the preview pages, there's like 4 or 5 pages there with no dialogue. It's just Periwinkle. And I think those speak more than any word I could have ever put in there, just kind of speaking to the immensity of his world and how small he is, and the loneliness of his world, and the solitude of him. So yeah, I think, again, just those chapters kind of gave me the guidance I needed. So I was thankful that I kind of thought that up to do a chapter style. Very much like Kill Bill. Again, I think that's why people jump back to Kill Bill mixed with Elf. Just kind of organically worked that way.
How did you find Periwinkle's voice in this? Because that's always something that, I know for me, when I'm writing, if I'm using somebody else's characters, then I go through and I look as much as I can to figure out their voice that's already written. But if I'm writing something new, I almost cast the parts so that I can kind of picture that person when I'm writing, and whether it's a famous person or somebody I know. How do you go about that? Getting the tone and voice for a particular character?
Yeah, I do something similar. A lot of times I'll try to think of like who I imagine voicing this character. the Periwinkle's hard because I don't think I ever really settled on like an actor to do the voice or anything like that. I probably sound crazy when I'm writing because I'll be in my office and I'll be doing voices, out loud as I'm reading through the scenes. So again, having the fact that I've went through like 4 iterations of this story, and each iteration of Periwinkle was just a little bit more, not necessarily different, a little bit more refined. That gave me the chance to really fine tune his voice. And then the addition of another character, which I haven't introduced yet in the preview pages, but he'll show up pretty soon. His name's Alabaster, and he's kind of the surrogate father to Periwinkle. So in earlier scripts, I had to balance. I wanted to balance out I wanted an Alabaster Periwinkle combo essentially. It just wasn't organic. It didn't sound right. So the fact I could split that into 2 and then also create a conduit for exposition as well through Alabaster. So I was able to kind of, and it's almost like this dichotomy, like, the yin and yang with Periwinkle and Alabaster and the 2 sides of the spectrum that they represent. So I was able to thankfully find the right voice by adding an additional character, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely it's one of the hardest parts is finding that right voice and how you want to speak. How do you want them to speak your words?
Yeah. Well, I think getting exposition out, especially if you have a character who's alone most of the time, is very difficult. I've used a few different tricks. Probably the one that always comes to mind for me is I did a book called Savage with Steve Niles and Mike Mayhew, and I had a character that was supposed to say a lot of dialogue and just a lot of exposition. So I gave him a severed head to talk to throughout the entire thing. So just so he's talking to something. So yes, he's crazy, but he's a little less crazy,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I did something similar with that with Dead and Moon. There's a character called Jack. He's a ghost, and only she can see him. So that's, I love that idea of a severed head. Something again, that just to bounce those words off, because I'm fine with it or narration. I'm not saying artists or writers shouldn't use it, but I just have a hard time with it in my own writing. So anytime I can navigate away from narration and just have that character talking to somebody, I'd prefer that, and I'll find a route for that rather than do narration.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of narration unless you're doing a noir. Then it's kind of part of the genre.
Yeah.
You want that narrative flow, but otherwise, and I'm also not a fan of word balloons. The thought bubbles.
Oh yeah, no. I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah.
I'm not sure when those became passé in comics, but I'm glad they did.
No kidding. Yeah, looking back on those, I was like, oh, it's just kind of cringy.
Absolutely. So, all right, we got maybe a minute or 2 left. Is there anything about Periwinkle that potential fans or potential backers should know about?
Yeah, just that it's a 80-page behemoth of a book you're going to get. Another great thing is Mike Tiener is offering one of his new IPs. His name is Wrath, which is a mech story about a mech that goes against the legions of hell. Excuse me. So if you like that type of story, Mike is offering that with Periwinkle, so you can get a graphic novel, an 80-page plus graphic novel, plus a regular issue floppy for like $35. That's just unprecedented. You don't see that kind of deal on Kickstarter. And then we're also offering hardcover editions. They're limited editions, but they look gorgeous. So again, at a $50 price point, you can't beat that. And then with the add-ons, Mike's offering all of the Bad Bug books, so you can catch up on all of them. And a big thing is all the issues he's coming out with the Bad Bug team's coming out with the next issues in 2022. So Pocus Hocus 2, Pocus Hocus 3 is coming out in 2022, Midnight Highway, Dead and Moon, I just finished writing, so we're working on that one already. Undercity Tales 2, I'm literally writing the script as we speak for that one. So all this stuff's coming out in 2022. You can catch up on all of it on this Kickstarter. There's just so much to get. So yeah, you should get it because it's worth it.
All right. That's a great place to end it. Thank you for coming on today, Scott. I hope everybody will go to your Kickstarter and check it out. The
Yes,
best way
please.
to get to the Kickstarter looks like you can look for Periwinkle on Kickstarter, or it's under William Tenner as the listing. So you can go that way to get out. Hopefully, JD or Kyle will be able to put the actual link into the chat when this airs. But so thank you again for coming on, and
Thank you.
good luck with the project. I hope it's very successful for you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. And this is, like I said, probably going to be airing on Wednesday. So tomorrow on the Dan Wickline Show, we will be doing another deep dive into the latest episode of Hawkeye, which will be the third one at this point since the first two debuted. So join me tomorrow for that. Have yourself a great evening, and we'll talk soon.